smile.
Doing it, draw.
Okay, welcome everybody for our June 10th meeting. We have a guest today, Brian Cassette. Okay, we'll get to you. Right now, we have people out there and Brian will know who we are. We'll start with you,
Okay, all
Ellen.
right, Ellen Corrales.
Brian Cassidy.
John Carroll.
Langley.
Ray LaRoche.
Anton Beckeren.
Alberto Manalo.
Holly Philbrick.
Okay, Brian, you want to go?
Jumping right up. All right, here we go. It's probably easier to see. Well, okay, here it is.
Wow.
Okay, so first, before we get to that, I guess I could probably go. I'm sure I have a slide up at the top about Freedom Cafe. This is the beginning of a presentation that I do as an educational program across the seacoast. But I'm Brian. I'm the executive director of Freedom Cafe down the road on Main. We've been going strong in town for a little over 10 years as a nonprofit, or coming up on our 10-year anniversary in 2025. And our mission is to end human trafficking and commercial exploitation. And sadly, trafficking and commercial exploitation takes place in over 158 goods that are produced across the globe. And so we have a mission to bring awareness to this reality, the reality of trafficking in the state of New Hampshire, the United States as a whole, and across the globe in the way that it impacts supply chains, to kind of raise the bar and consciousness of our community that the way that we consume either supports businesses that are multinational businesses that are making a tremendous amount of money off of modern day slavery labor, or by supporting businesses that are doing an exceptional job at navigating supply chains and ensuring that they are paying a living wage for the products that they're producing. And so I thought for a second as I was looking over, like, why am I presenting to the Agricultural Committee? Well, part of the reason why I'm presenting to the Agricultural Committee is that over the spring semester, we had a Semester for Impact Fellow as part of UNH's Sustainability UNH's Sustainability Institute and the College for Social Impact. And Susie Sheriff, as our fellow over the course of the semester, her role and her goal was to begin the process of helping us produce a guide that draws attention to the businesses in Durham first, eventually the Seacoast as a whole, that are doing a really good job of navigating sustainability issues and supply chain issues. Because we feel like there needs to be a cheerleader, there needs to be public energy around, support for, and securing and auditing their supply chains. And so as you can see here, thinking about the Agricultural Committee, and I know that we're thinking very much around Durham and Lee and Madbury and our local communities, agricultural production. And the reality, 58 goods produced globally, goods being the raw materials that produce millions of other products, are known to be produced with forced labor and child labor, exploitive child labor. And agriculture, as you can see, is one of the largest areas. And so some of these multinational companies that are utilizing exploitive labor are undermining our local agricultural community businesses and efforts and farms. And so I guess part of why we came out here tonight is to think about how do we garner support for this initiative to produce a guide that will help our community members understand what businesses are really up to. Some of our businesses are doing really well, and they should be celebrated. And most of the time, as a small business, you don't have a lot of time to toot your own horn. You're trying to do some advertising. We audited one of our local restaurants in town, and they were right there, ready to go to be in our guide. And we audited in kind of the sample set. We audited the New Moon clothing thrift store. Again, another business that is doing an exceptional job at their supply chain, their sustainability initiatives. And so, and it's almost slipping my mind here. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, oh gosh, it is slipping my mind. It's not written down for me. There's a local organization that puts out guides to restaurants and to small home goods shops, and you have to pay for that marketing initiative, and you can pay and be a part of community benefits from knowing what some of these businesses are like. We want to do that free of charge for businesses, and by initiating a survey. So Susie put together the first ever assessment tool that will help us identify the ethical businesses, will enable the Freedom Cafe to audit those businesses, rate businesses, and our goal is to celebrate those that are achieving a level of consciousness and a level of a B or a higher in the assessment. And we can pull up the assessment here. It's about a 20-minute process for our local businesses. So this is the Citizen Consumer Assessment. We ask the businesses to take that 20 minutes to think specifically about, first, what kind of a business type they are. There are, based on the business type that you choose, there are a series of questions. Sorry about that. It did ask me if I wanted to connect to my phone earlier.
There should be a guest note. Hello.
Where did this guys come from?
Looks like it is reloading.
There we go.
I have a question though, when you refer to human trafficking
Yeah.
on the agricultural side. A lot of farm families in the Northeast bring their families up that way.
Yeah.
and you're referring to that as human trafficking.
So
That can get you it gets kind of offensive.
definition, starting out in the year 2000 with the federal government's human trafficking Human Trafficking Prevention Act defined human trafficking, and New Hampshire has adopted able to be proven in order for an act traffic. There has been trafficking in all 10 counties of the state of New Hampshire. There has been commercial sex, as well as there's been trafficking in a number of different industries, from cleaning industries to restaurant industries, rural industries. In 2015, Ben and Jerry's helped put together the Milk with Dignity program, because a number of the farm workers, the migrant workers that were coming to work on dairy farms across New Hampshire and Vermont were working with less than 8 hours rest to have a toilet, not being paid a living wage or minimum wage for either state. That whole thing came a young man.
That's much standard agricultural living right there. Type of thing to me. And I run a full.
Are you saying that?
I mean, I have grandkids that work at my farm.
Yeah.
That they're 8, 9, 10 years old. What you're referring to is human trafficking. It's their choice to do what they're doing. I mean,
Sometimes.
well, it's their choice. They
And
don't
if someone
have to
is
be their
making a
parents.
choice, then it's not human trafficking. So there are children. I just met with a group of human rights organizers in the Ivory Coast through our connection with the New Hampshire, through the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire that works specifically with the United States State Department. And we know in the chocolate industry that hundreds of thousands of young kids are not only being kidnapped and brought over the borders to work in chocolate farms. We don't pay enough to a chocolate farmer for them to even pay for the seed and the fertilizer and the product that they're producing to keep their farms and their cocoa beans or their cocoa plants growing strongly. So they are feeling a sense of being forced to have to find slave labor. And we have kids as young as 4 and 5 year olds who are running around with machetes, getting injured regularly day by day, harvesting cocoa, so that we as consumers in the United States are able to have a dollar Hershey's chocolate bar or Nestle's chocolate bar. Your family working on a farm. That is not your children helping support you. This is not a family raising a dozen kids and having them help out on their cocoa farm. I worked with a young man at UNH whose family were cocoa farmers in Ghana, and he said, I want absolutely nothing to do with the chocolate farming because it is impossible to make a living, and everywhere you look, in every farm, kids are being exploited. So the level of that which is happening, I know there are great farms in New Hampshire. My uncle was one of them in Piermont, New Hampshire, and he and one of his friends in a neighboring farm hired numerous migrant workers, paid them a living wage, a responsible wage. The world who are like, $6 an hour is far better than no, we would call that a labor violation. So overseen by the United States Department of Labor, it would not be considered a human trafficking case in that environment.
From a cocoa standpoint, which is kind of interesting, just in the last year, it's gone from an average of $2,000 a metric ton to $10,000 a metric ton. And I'm sure that money isn't going to the people growing it. So clearly there's issues beyond just the people that are forced by lack of resources to seek labor that's not appropriate.
Right.
But those guys who are raking in that windfall are getting away with it.
And in some cases,
So
it's the
more here, it's gone up by that much more simply because of the price of cocoa. So, I mean, we're into how you resolve people with huge sums of money in their pocket contributing to this. The cobalt in our
Microchips.
lovely,
Yeah.
green revolution is being dug out by little kids, and there are people once they pile it into a conglomerate pile from the mines and from what these little kids are digging out of the ground, being poisoned, all of that at the time as well, shortening their lives. Once they aggregate it, there's no way to determine where it came from. And so, the big companies that are buying that stuff, they're turning a blind eye. So, who's
A
really
lot of them
at
are.
fault here? The actual people.
And became very dramatically aware of the mining operations in the Democratic Republic. And there was a nonprofit that drew this CEO's attention to the issue, and so understand the supply chain on the ground, and eventually worked out, navigated a system and established clean refining area. Work on it. They were able to see which was 2012 that they initiated the very first conflict mineral free microchip. They did a whole series of education windows. They had YouTube videos. They had a big piece on their website about this entire process, the amount of money that they invested in it. It didn't get anywhere near the level of traction that I think publicly is necessary for people as general consumers to understand. There's a difference between a company that is willing to invest this level in securing their supply chain and a company that's willing to just take the status quo and continue to support the gangs and the cheap cobalt that's coming in for their microchips. And in the next 3 years, I don't know the technology side. As a nonprofit activist, I feel challenged that companies like Apple decided to go away from Intel. Was it because the Intel chips were getting too expensive? Were they wanting to, or was it just the tech? No, but I'm challenged by the reality that Intel in the market, when they're the only one that you can access that is actually produced.
A large percentage of consumers who don't care, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And
no,
they will buy the cheaper version and have no interest in the traffic
That's
inside.
really
So
where
how do you
sit as an organization right at this juxtaposition of course, I think in our years of being in operation here in Durham, we initially attract people who already want to be sustainable, who already want to. I've watched UNH students walk by and laugh at our mission statement on our sign. Like, oh my gosh, those are the people who are trying to have an ethical supply chain. Ha ha ha, that's not possible. And yet, as we sit on Main Street and offer a good product for a fair price, we're starting to see many more people come into our cafe that, in my observation, are less compost. I think to myself, okay, we are in a place where now we're connecting with people who aren't already thinking intentionally about how they are sustainable, what their footprint is, and that means that we have a role in helping to educate and bring new people along in this journey of sustainability. So yes, we're here to bring people who have not been conscious into a place of being more conscious about what they buy and how in a sustainable way. It's a great question, Ray. I appreciate it, and I respect the challenge and the back and forth. And I think I ride my bike by your farm every single day.
Out of all your things on there, how many were family farms and how many were commercial?
In
the Northeast or whatever.
In the Northeast, in terms of the dairy farms?
Dairy farms, vegetable farms, whatever.
How many are commercial? Meaning, like, as opposed to, like, my uncle's family farm, who...
Was it a family farm or
His was a family farm, yeah.
Okay. Because that makes a big difference, because We don't have that many big commercial farms in this
I'm
part.
getting coffee from, or the tea farms. They're not plantations, or the cacao farms in Ivory Coast, Ghana, in Guatemala, and Peru. These are small, like maybe 1,500 hectare farms. They're small farms. That's the case mostly around the globe, and so these small farms are trying, just like you are, to vie with these big multinational conglomerates, and that's really challenging.
But you also have this situation like production companies who have farmers raise the birds for them, and they are required by the standards of the company to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to them, which they can never get out of because they're so indebted and they're not paid well as they had been led to believe.
Yeah.
So, even though you have all these cacao farms out there, they're selling to a massive cartel, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to call it a cartel because that has debt probably up to their eyeballs, and they can't walk away. Same the
In the-
chicken
in the
farmers, and that's in
cacao.
this country.
Yeah, well, in the cacao, which is probably in terms of the Freedom Cafe, in Ghana, which is the second largest chocolate producing country in the world, in cooperative Coco Copao, which is all small farmers who have been drawn together in the United States and in Europe as Divine Chocolate. You can find Divine Chocolate in almost every grocery store. We've been selling it our entire existence, and they have drawn numerous small farmers in and have been able to negotiate a fair price. Training for the farmers, they're processing it themselves, and they're raw cacao to a business that makes all the money on the finished product. And that's been an exemplar for what can be done with chocolate, and has transformed hundreds of farms, small farms in Ghana, and it's among countries that are farming cocoa and other products.
Right.
We have to have the ability to negotiate prices. We've seen similar in coffee in Ethiopia. Lots of small farms, the micro lots of coffee, that you, as a small farmer, have no ability to negotiate a price. There's actually one woman who had got an education in England, went back to the area in Ethiopia that produces some of the most exotic and unique coffees, and she began to negotiate with farmers and changed government policy so that those farmers could get a fair wage for their coffee going out, exporting out of Ethiopia to the US. So again, I'm here today because Todd would love to have you present to the Agricultural Committee, to the Waste Management Committee, and to the Human Rights Committee, to get a sense of what questions the community of Durham has. How can, is this something that would be beneficial to the town of Durham, to our consumers as a whole? Is there a way that we can help encourage our businesses as a whole across the board to want to be more sustainable, to have an incentive to be more sustainable, to have an incentive to think of goods, but to think about where do these goods come from and how is it impacting my neighbors locally and around the globe. So I'm here, kind of opening up this discussion, getting your all's feedback, and hopefully it will help this project to become a better project, more impactful project, and more helpful for the Durham community as a whole.
Is there any element of that program which would help small trace their supply chains? Because obviously if they're a small business, they don't have a lot of spare time to seek this in their own. They may not have the time or resources to do it. So is that part of the project?
So, out there of what people have done. Access Navigators is a nonprofit in Portsmouth, where an incredible gentleman who had been a business leader in the area, became a quadriplegic. And he used to go out in Portsmouth regularly to dine, to enjoy the community and entertainment in Portsmouth. And suddenly, as a quadriplegic, was unable to know where he could go or whether he would be able to get into a restaurant. And so he began to simply go around the community and assess local businesses on how accessible they were. And Access Navigators was born, and they moved from creating hey, here's our website that says these 10 restaurants are actually accessible, and if you are someone with accessibility issues, you can get here, you can enjoy being, and we want to just help you as a consumer get to those spaces, to businesses saying, how do I become more accessible? Yes, there's ADA requirements, but beyond those ADA requirements, what can I do as a business to make my space comfortable and hospitable to people across all accessibility capacities? And so that Access Navigators for me was the inspiration behind this, was to one, say, I already know there are a lot of businesses that are doing a great job. I know they don't have a lot of time to celebrate or tout or ring the bell about how they're sustainable, and we want to help them. But secondly, as we grow in this, we want to become consultants. We have an audit process, and we've in our letter, in our project proposal to businesses, have said we have a series of resources, and we would love to help you free of charge as a nonprofit to become more intentional about where you buy things. We have a list of suppliers that can be used. We have a clear list of the products that are the most culpable or have the greatest risk of being produced by forced labor and exploitive child labor around the globe, and we would love to support you in your process of becoming
to contact you and take this audit survey then.
Exactly.
And then that would put people in a position where they could have access to all this other help that you have available.
And I think that's the risk. I feel like, we connected with businesses, immediately, 5 businesses that we know are already working really hard at being conscious. We're like, oh, sure, we'll take the survey. I mean, what risk is there? So I think there's a risk for a business. Well, I don't really know a lot about this, and what are you going to do with my data if it comes out in the MUB and Dunkin' Donuts here at Irving? Huge difference, because UNH has policies in place that have different requirements than just a regular franchise. Both would not make it on our guide as a sustainable business, but the difference was 40 points from utter failure to the UNH getting a C. Actually paying a fair wage, being smarter about their composting and their not necessarily their supply chain per se, but the rest of their practices in terms of making sure that their work employee community and their trash and compost and recycling was being done in a way that is more sustainable.
So how do you ease their fear that that they take this audit and it turns out that it's not good, and then they choose to go no further because it doesn't matter, because some reason they think
you don't have any authority to force anything.
Exactly.
It's just really okay, and now it's up,
right, but they
it's up
also
to them.
but they have the ability to out people.
But that's not your goal.
But that's not the intent. I'm
That's
sure
not your
that's not the
intent.
intent. Because it's counterproductive.
That is an issue.
It is
So
a concern.
One of the
that people
questions
will
that I
have.
wanted to ask is how on those practices, and I ask because let's say that you have this guide, people don't demand for their product, so they have a choice. They can either close down because they don't have the demand, or they can take on costs that are not covering their potential revenues from the supposed increase in demand if they follow those guidelines, right? So there is a potential for actually putting businesses out of business, and so I would love to hear your thoughts on how all of that plays out in small communities.
That's a a really great question. That's the hard 5-10 year down the line question. If this initiative moves where we have 90% of businesses have achieved a participation in the guide, and then there's a small percentage of businesses that don't have a sticker on the door that says that they have achieved this rating. I mean, there has to be an entire consumer shift.
Absolutely.
And we know, I mean, years ago, what business was it that talked about the fair price for a T-shirt? One, like early YouTube, one of the Business Insider or something ran a whole documentary on. That is the case with a lot of our goods. That if we're not paying a living wage for the raw commodities, we're not passing on those costs. So there has to be a cultural shift that we are willing as consumers to pay more. And so a business that is consistently saying, I'm gonna not buy an item that is fairly made, and I'm going to charge people a price that is making me all the profit to neglect of profit for the people that are producing those raw materials. I would be happy to see that organization go out of business, unfortunately. But my hope is that consumer pressure as a whole, the rise in our willingness to pay a fair wage for a sandwich or an item of clothing, a pair of shoes, enables us all to thrive together collectively. And so in terms of a local Durham business, for our part as the Freedom Cafe, we want to see the bar one. And as someone who has now really been steeped in this business, I agree. Coffee, to pay for rent, to pay for your stand, and I mean we could talk about the minimum wages and kids working versus trying to sustain a mom and her kids as a kitchen manager. Totally different, and it's challenging. We are always stretching, and I don't think any of our businesses in Durham are making $1 million and just we're all struggling and trying to do the right thing. I want to celebrate and champion and support our businesses, and I want to help all of us as consumers and as businesses to become more conscious and more capable of paying a fair wage to down the supply chain.
When I was dealing with this subject in UNH classrooms over the years, we approached it from the point of view of what is an appropriate percent of income that should be spent on food. And we determined that the Europeans were spending 18 to 23% of income on food. The French were at the top at 23% on food, and always looking, of course, for the cheap alternative in the supermarkets. And there's a reason why supermarket windows would be just covered with sale prices going back decades and decades of that sort of thing. And I think if we could ever get used to spending 18 to 23% of income on food instead of 9%, the problem would largely be taken care of. But we want the 9%, or as cheap as we can get it. And so therefore...
That's really interesting.
Yeah, the pressure is on to find all kinds of ways, including sometimes illicit or illegal ways or whatever, or taking advantage of people, to keep the price down as much as possible. Yeah. But we really need to be spending, we concluded, 18 to 23% of income on food. Now, that doesn't include restaurant services and things of that, but the food that comes into the household.
Yeah. That's fascinating, yeah.
You're mentioning, the importance of engaging consumers. I think is very, very important. It's essential for the success of this endeavor. Writing, through my work at the university, trying to support small farmers. My advice to them is, don't as merely customers. Think of them as your partners, and try everything that you can do to make them feel that indeed, they are your partners.
Yeah.
And so I think it is very appropriate also, in this endeavor. Cultural and social political change even, that you're advocating for. There must be cohesive, consistent support from both the producers, the vendors, and the customers.
I think in terms of addressing forced labor globally, there's government and policy as one branch, and there's significant policy change in loophole in a tariff act that allowed for goods. Basically, the tariff act said if there is a demand for a product above and beyond what can be produced in the United States, even if it's made with forced labor or with prison labor in another country, it can come into the United States. That loophole was closed in 2015, went into effect in 2016, and working specifically on case law to help ensure that that loophole is closed. It's not. We know and they know that businesses are bringing things in from around the globe that are produced with forced labor, and they specifically talk about how it's undermining production, and that's part of why it needs to be addressed. And there are large businesses that have the resources to invest, like Intel did, in a more secure supply chain. There are businesses like Nestle who have been brought to Supreme Court over the fact that their explosion said these 3 chocolate workers from Ivory Coast didn't have a right to bring a case against Nestle, but the labor, and yet they refuse to do anything about it. So policy, government, business, corporate involvement in decision making and internal decisions and policy within the business, corporate supply chain management, and corporate social responsibility, and then consumer pressure to say this business is not actually taking action, and therefore we are willing to support. We're not going to support your business. We're going to support a business that we see and has verified that human rights and in their sustainability. We need all 3 of those branches working together. And so our role is on the policy side, though we seek to know the policy and to advocate for policy reform, but to make those socially responsible decisions.
So another impact on the cost or the ecological cost that is not factored into products. The oil industry is a perfect example. We pay for the cost of extraction, but we don't pay. It seems to me that this is just one little piece of a giant. Pay the appropriate cost for everything, we would not be able to afford a lot of things. I don't know what the price of gas would be if we paid for the ecological cost, but it certainly would be a lot higher than what we're paying now. And by trying to achieve these changes, I think that at some point you're going to run into a wall where people say, I can't afford to help everything kind of thing, because most of us have resources, especially in this country, far beyond many countries, and yet people don't want to spend more on things like food, stuff like that. And they're, how do you change that?
Either, do
How do
you?
you
No matter
yeah.
how much the world is
How
getting.
do you change it? Right.
Yeah.
People aren't going to change
Dave,
easily.
or they can't, right?
Or they
I mean, a lower
Yeah.
income becomes quite a bit
Yeah,
harder
it's
to handle than
huge.
18% of
Yeah.
a higher income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I don't disagree
it's
with anything that
it's
you're
a
saying.
nightmare situation we've created for ourselves as a civilization that is going to resolve somehow, and it probably isn't going to be easy or pretty or, well, it might be real fast. In the
I'm
wrong
curious,
direction.
can you go back to what is the Durham component to
Yeah.
this, and how does ag and food, I guess, relate to that?
Yeah. So bringing, like, exemplar of access navigators, where are the places that are accessible for someone to go let's take our mission, our purpose for existence, and to address human trafficking and to look at the businesses that are around us and say, of course, we would love for you to come to the Freedom Cafe, but that's not going to solve the world's problems. It's great. We can have a happy little community where we all feel good about ourselves buying a cup of coffee, but we have a whole host of other needs of things that we want to buy. Where can we feel good about buying those resources? What local coffee shops, what local clothing stores, what local grocery stores and markets providing products consistently that have have practices that are moving towards sustainability, that are dealing with their waste responsibly, that are giving back to the community in a way that is mutually supportive, that are own employees and have a good workspace culture. So we're looking at all of those elements, motivated, largely by recognizing that a holistically healthy business is ultimately, one that is sustainable and interconnected with the community. So for us, we're trying to first create some energy for the businesses in Durham who are doing a really good job, who are being thoughtful about that. And to say, hey, it's not just Freedom Cafe that is seeking to be a responsible company in Durham, also seeking to be a responsible company. And let's celebrate that. And the goal, I think as we started this project, we started thinking very broadly about the entire Seacoast, and we know 15 companies that are like low-hanging fruit that we're like, let's just put a guide out about these companies, they're doing great. And then the Semester for Impact fellow cohort kind of pushed back on that and said, hey, you're settling. That's like just kind of working with people you already know are doing a really good job, and kind of growing it from there is, maybe not a responsible way of starting this project. Why don't you start within Durham and kind of build out your Durham community of consumers that are already coming to the cafe and start helping them see that these various draw new business into Durham, to say there's this cohort of great businesses in Durham. Once we have established ourselves within the Durham community, move on and then in Dover. And then once we have Newmarket, Durham, and Dover, then we can kind of branch out. The marketing company was Seacoast lately, and they have an email list of like 200,000 people that they are sending. Maybe we go on and say, hey, here's a guide to sustainable coffee shops. Here's a guide to sustainable for the little clothing boutiques in the area.
So let's cheat. And I come to you and I say, I want to do better.
Yeah.
And I come to you and I say, what I want to do is I need resources for farms and food distributors in New Hampshire that I can go to get my food.
Yeah.
Would you be able to provide, because that could draw some of the things that we talk about, right? That draws the attention of those businesses to local farming, local ag production. And not only does it benefit the business, it benefits those farmers, and what it can do is benefit the community. Ag production in our communities is really important because it supports those businesses. So what are the kind of resources that you will provide for the ag businesses in Durham and let's say with the Seacoast community?
Yeah, Farm Alliance, we work hand in hand with Sustainability Institute and Aaron Hale, who kind of oversees a lot of that as part of the New Hampshire, the Farm Alliance. So we would begin to connect businesses with those organizations. We would look through their, we work with a distributor that's Baldor, that works with regional distribution in the area. The Native Maine is one that juicery uses quite a lot, that does mostly main available in those particular distributors and where they could access those and what that process would be like to get an account with those organizations.
Okay. So you are going to provide those. I was just asking whether you're going to, in addition to not only finding out whether a business passes whatever bar, if a business doesn't and they want to get better,
that's the most exciting part.
They can come to you and they can, because I think for tell me guys to shut up if I'm not telling what we are all about, right?
Yeah,
but for us, what's important is to enable those who want to produce food locally to do so, and part of that is not only for the food that we eat, if they know where to go. So connecting those dots, and I'm not saying like Durham to Durham, but Durham businesses that sell food with food, seacoast areas that produce, seacoast farmers who produce it.
How do you do your rating or grading of businesses?
Yeah.
Especially like Durham, a college town, where a lot of businesses rely on college students.
Yeah.
And on the off season, when the students go away from graduation, whatever, personnel tends to drop on a lot of businesses, and then they have hiring problems.
Yeah, that is.
How do you rate that? And it's not just Durham. I mean, Exeter has the same issue when Phillips Exeter shuts down for the summer, and Portsmouth.
So I really wish that Susie was able to be here when we went. Susie went through a B Corporation clinic and looked at a series of certifications, and I think she came up with a really strong rubric. And I would have to go back to my notes to kind of process exactly what the scaling is. We scale heavy on supply chain, and there's a point value for each aspect of the connection to the community, the waste management, the employee management, and wage management.
So is it a year that you?
It would be a year.
A year that you check up?
Initial assessment, and then if a business did not make have the opportunity to be reassessed within a year later. For businesses that did make the guide, we would reassess every improving their score.
How do you see the guide being distributed?
I would say and marketed across the Portsmouth community, the Durham community. I think we have really I guess that I would say that aspect, my hope is spend more energy on the marketing of that after we get this initial Durham assessment done, and I would spend an entire semester working with UNH's marketing department to think critically about how to best market the guide.
It seems to me that you need, something like a seal of approval, like the USDA, certified organic, that business establishments can, display on their facility.
That we're thinking specifically about for businesses themselves to be able to have, a seal on the door or on the window, on the counter. I don't want to move the conversation, but I had thought of this for 35 years. I'm not sure how familiar. Their own process of being involved in food systems. June 20th to 22nd, my members are going down to what they're calling a Citizen Consumer Summit. We've been partnered with Equal over the years, but they are trying to bigger challenging issues like you're talking about, in terms of we couldn't possibly afford to buy the food that we need and to buy the uses that we need if it was all sustainable. So they actually initiated for us. We were going to call it the Conscious to Durham, and as we started reading through some material that they began to put out 6 months ago, kind of drawing attention to citizen consumer. What is our role as a citizen? To be a responsible citizen, to think about how we are involved in our extended community, how we're involved in our governmental processes, how we are involved, and what is our role as a consumer, and kind of sealing those two ideas together. It's kind of that, and my hope as I go in and build those relationships at the Citizen Consumer Summit to think about what something like this guide could do to draw attention to businesses that are thinking through the process from their side, and it helps citizens to also feel there. But that collectively, we are trying to understand the food economy, we're trying to understand the clothing economy, and we have to work together as citizens, consumers, businesses, providers, farms, so that we are able to kind of crack this nut of sharing together in a more healthy for everyone environment.
Are you including York County in your local studies?
Not at all at
There's
this
far more
point.
food production in York County than there is in Stratford or Rockingham.
Yeah.
And it's immediately next door. The state line should not be significant in that way.
Yeah, it's very true. Any other questions or comments? Is there any advice as we tackle this that you feel like I should really take into consideration that maybe?
Keep up the good food at Freedom Cafe.
Thank you.
I don't know, I feel like if I was in Dave's vein, I would think about the ecological impact, because if I was a conscious, I wouldn't buy coffee, period.
That's interesting.
It doesn't belong here, it doesn't grow here. And so for me, that in very conditional places of what we need to buy, how we all need to be seen to be a human in this life. And it's all confining, and it's all really hard, but the ecological impact is huge.
Right. And it's
Every little step, whether you want to be the B Corporation or you want to be fair exchange, it's like the literal part of it. It's
Right.
like coffee doesn't belong in this New England,
Right.
period.
And it's all predicated on continued economic
bananas don't
growth.
belong here. None of it belongs here,
Based on the transportation element.
which is a huge impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like back to like, how do we grow local food? For me, it's like, tomorrow we're not going to take coffee out or we're not going to take bananas out, but what's the next step? And so it's like, I can support your business because I do care about what you're doing, but
It's interesting.
Which is- which is not a judgment. It's just like, if we're
Sure.
asking the hardest question,
Right.
that's it.
Because everything you're talking about is predicated on continued economic growth. Nobody's talking about what happens when growth ends. And we're very close, some say, to that point.
Yeah.
So I'm scared
And people
of,
talking about degrowth, whatever
Yeah,
that
Jack
means.
Nichols.
and I'm scared of
reading that,
perpetuation of conditions that are always going to exist. So whether you grade another scale, you put someone else down, and we don't have the hard conversation of what someone's going through. Of a farmer, it's not a farmer's fault. No one's making money out of this, what we do. Besides, say, a corporation who owns whatever, but it's like the perpetuation that we keep existing in the same system of capitalism is killing all of us. Whether you want to be a conscious consumer, a conscious business owner, it's killing all of us when you make a choice
Yeah.
that way. So I support these steps that we all are trying to make, and for me, it's like I want the model to break completely because it's not working, which is hard to live with because I don't know what the resolution is. But to me, it's like we're perpetuating a system that will always fail us.
Yeah.
Like the old saying, if you're making money farming, you're doing something.
I guess I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but this you put me to the test a little bit. It's great. I am glad to be a part of Durham, and I'm happy at any point if you are thinking of things that can help us improve our model, improve our work. Absolutely open to hearing that, and thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. We need to approve May's meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Abstain.
So
everyone.
Any correspondence? We have enough.
Nobody's written to me.
Okay, old business, resident outreach.
Wait, can I go back to correspondences? There was a correspondence from Todd Seelig.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Nice job. Nice job, Anton.
I just
Good.
wanted to ignore that.
I will write the letter to remind the committee, the council, that there is vast amounts of information there, that nothing has changed, and it doesn't like the smell, and thus we need to stop a particular complaint.
Yeah, no, you don't.
Well, delivered here.
Yeah.
The smell comes out every
Just pure
spring and every fall.
It sure does.
You might belong around here.
These are very old issues that have been repeated and replicated.
Okay.
Could try feeding the cows some mint. Improve
Well,
the-
that could
the
do
after-
both. I mean, it could
the
keep the mice
afterglow.
away. We're
Yeah.
having a serious mice and rat
Right.
problem.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
I went through that. We have chipmunks.
Chipmunks,
Lots of
rabbits.
chipmunks.
a little cuter than rats.
All right, let's go to residential outreach and focus group, which is you two. I don't know, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can start. Thanks to Teresa and Ellen and Alberto for being there. We had 7 or 8 people. That's right. It was a good meeting. So there were a couple outcomes. Teresa sent the notes along, but one is certainly it was the case to put anything out publicly in terms of food production. I think the terms agriculture and production refer the focus group members responded to that in most people who are not familiar with agriculture would. It's big farms, it's big production. It's not what we do in Durham. It's not what we want to see done in Durham. So that was pretty clear. Local food consumption, which was great. I think we'll likely see similar sentiments on the survey results. That's my guess. When we switched to the desire to grow food locally, that's where I think we saw a bit of a deviation from kind of our conversations that we have had here in our group. We asked these series of questions of the comfort level of, your neighbors growing plants and crops, your neighbors having chickens for eggs, your neighbors having chickens for meat. And for the most part, through those questions, it was fine. The chickens for meat one was, basically, no problem to slaughter and process those chickens in a way that I will editorialize, please correct me, but as long as I don't see it, right? As long as I don't see what's happening.
Yeah, I think they generally felt that Durham residents would not be on board with people slaughtering their animals in their own backyard.
Right.
So as long as they took them someplace and had, people would be happy about
Right.
that.
One question.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Were they from the downtown area or they rural? I asked that question last
Yeah,
month.
that's a great question. I think we had, unfortunately, an undersampling of folks from downtown.
Okay.
It was mostly folks from more rural areas.
And they're opposed.
Yeah, you had,
Yes.
And they're
Yeah.
opposed to people
you had-
processing their
Right.
own meat.
Well,
And
I-
that's-
Then it's
Yeah.
game over
And-
because
and
no
that's-
one can
yeah.
afford to send it out and have it
Yeah,
done
that's
like
how-
that.
We don't have the
Most of
facilities
it's just
around
plain
here.
ignorance on the part of
And-
the people who are afraid, but, that's
Well,
just my opinion.
I think the group that we had was actually, they were actually more like us, but they were also thinking in terms of
Their
what
neighbors.
their neighbors
yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
feel.
And that was the intent, right?
And it was, and I think they felt that they're, you know, that sort of not going to fly in general with people.
What's interesting is that their answer was not how essentially they felt someone else looking at their neighbor doing
Well,
it would
yeah,
be.
and-
So it wasn't like a direct relationship of how do you literally feel about somebody, you know, processing.
both.
Well, they all
It was
said,
both.
they
It was
all
both,
said,
yeah.
yeah, they all said it would be fine with us.
For them. But-
we understand
Yeah.
that and that it's true. This was a group of people who are very sympathetic.
Yeah.
But then
to-
our goal then would be to probably educate those who would.
I don't know. I don't know because so then we asked and you and I had an email exchange about this, but we asked about the pigs, right?
Right.
And that's where I felt like even that group said, "Whoa, like, that's too much noise." Like the amount of land that's needed.
They were also very concerned about the fact that they didn't want us opening doors for people to get livestock in particular
And not be able to take care of
and not
them.
understand how to take care of
Right,
the property.
yeah.
They were very concerned about
Which we
that.
just had a major news that
Yes.
happened recently
Yes.
nearby,
Yes.
which does not aid. And it's a huge concern, that's true. And I agree with that could be a big problem.
Yeah, and all people, the sentiment was not all people like to see food being produced, right? And they hit it right, the nail on the head. That is what is true of Durham. It's probably true of many other communities.
Perhaps they should not be allowed to eat until they change their minds.
It's just that.
I'm just
it's
kidding,
people are
folks.
so far removed from this.
Calm down.
You know.
So it's I think that was a very true and again I think Ellen you're absolutely right. This was I was getting uncomfortable with how sympathetic this group was to food production like halfway in, and when they said that this was probably not going to fly,
Bridge too far.
that
Yeah.
was like wow, this very sympathetic group of people to what we talk about is laying down the
Yeah.
so I think we have to think about what that means and what, if anything, we want to include in whatever survey we put out there about that. And whether we want more information, whether we think this was an uncharacteristic sample, we want to put some parameters on the questions like would people produce animals for meat as long as they were processed outside of Durham, where we provide that context and the survey respondents don't start assuming things that may not actually be the case. Because that came out in the conversation very clearly, that once we went down that road, there's all of this, well, what if this? What if this? I don't think we want to see this. I don't think people would want to see that, which was very helpful to get a sense of how to frame some path forward where we can say, okay, well, 72% of respondents viewed this favorably within the context that we laid out to them. Maybe that's how we should bring it up to whatever, the planning board, the council, whatever it is. In terms of collaborative agriculture, collaborative food growth meant developed through this collaborative effort, just again to set the context of what people could envision. So I think that was, so do we want to define what that is, or do we want them to define it?
Right.
In a way, in a very positive way, a very hero-oriented way, collaborative food growing, I know doesn't roll off the tongue. That concept is what is going to enhance the Durham community in these ways.
Well,
How do you view
I think
this?
another issue that came up that, because we were discussing the, sort of in line with what we were talking about tonight, the difficulty or the feasibility of expecting that people in Durham were going to grow food.
Right.
And one of the main things that was brought up was the labor issue. You know, that people, when they actually get involved in trying to grow food, very quickly realize, wow, this takes a fair effort. And I think the idea of the collaborative food growing operations, it played positively in that direction of, okay, so if we can pool our energy, then we have a better chance of actually, because as we all know, people, they start gardens all the time, and then I mean, our inventories show this, that they start the garden and then next year you go, it's not there. And so how do you get people to be able to continue?
Well, as you know, I leapt forward several decades, apparently, given Durham's proclivities, but 8 people, and tentatively asked them if they would be interested in joining. I said, I have the sunlight and the space. Would you be interested in joining?
Your name was
growing
mentioned
food?
specifically during the discussion.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, 2 things came out of it. They all said yes, and I'm going, oh shit. That's really good. So somebody has to be sort of worked out pretty well, I think. And the other thing that was much more interesting to me is that it wasn't as food as the community. It created a neighborhood where, you see people say hi, it's just thing. And now we're like hanging out in the garden, talking to everybody. It elevated the sense of community within our little sphere 1,000%. And I even said, well, as we go along here, we may need to have people come out and maybe do watering on particular days and whatever. And the general consensus was, let's all come in together and do stuff. It's like, wow.
And I think those kind of stories, if we can test stories, look at what positive change this has made, and it could change on the margin. Some people, a great point of this idea that was brought up of resource sharing, and this idea that I think someone brought up, well, this very successful lawyer who may not have all this time to hoe in the garden might be able to do money to buy equipment, to buy the seed, do whatever, and that is going to be their contribution, as long as there was someone who was willing to put up the labor, or potentially have some sort of neighborhood compensation system.
Well, that was the initial discussion I had with one particular neighbor who felt that they were getting of an age where they didn't know how much they could put time-wise in, and would we be willing to accept money toward seed, whatever we needed. And I said, absolutely. It's more like, do what you're able and willing to do, and we'll coordinate it in such a way that everybody benefits from it. Since he mentioned that, he comes over almost every day for an hour. He says, I can put in an hour a day. An hour is
That's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
And he's an older gentleman, so he's he's limited on how much time he wants to spend on his knees pulling weeds, obviously, but there's tons of different tasks that he
Just give him
he
a
can
little
do
hose
and
and
does
give
do.
him a little canister with a hose and spray.
The Land Grant University. Durham is the host of an ag stock at the Ag Experiment Station. There were hogs, there were sheep, there were beef cattle, there was dairy cattle, and there was poultry.
I think so that there's 2 ways of viewing it, right? It's if we get the resources, we get the right people to come to use those resources, or we hire faculty who want to do research and then we provide those resources. The constraint right now at UNH is that there's not a lot of money to hire anyone.
There's nothing.
So we can get pigs, but no one to do anything with the pigs. So I think the constraint with any, I would be fine with it. I mean, I would be fine with someone coming to me and saying, I want to build a career around management of small livestock. And we would figure out something to make that happen. It's just
Maybe 8 years, you'll have
Possible.
people banging
Possible.
on the door for stuff like that, I think.
I know that there's growing demand from around the
Yeah.
state for that. And I know that Extension is increasingly having to get information from other states to provide that information to in-state producers. But that hasn't translated into faculty hire.
A-lot, the parking lot was all sheep when we arrived.
Still
difference.
is. One other thing that I noted or thought of and noticed, it's like ours, and Brian's got his, that there might be multiple groups around who could then, it's another layer of then the groups could interact and help one another. And then those groups that are interacting can, it could be a
And that's
pyramid.
That's a great point, and that was sorry, I'll mention
Yeah,
this is the last
No,
one.
go ahead.
Please add.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest gap right now is finding others who would want to do this. And so I think whatever survey we put out, we have a question on there that says, if you want to, we can figure out the logistics, but put your name into whatever database and it'll be there to connect you with others who potentially want to do this, right? Completely voluntary, and you can take the survey without putting in your name, but I think those connections.
I was actually, very, very enthused, encouraged by that focus group. So there are at least 6 other people interested in collaborative agriculture outside of this group in our community.
Right.
And I think that's great. So I think there are many more people out there.
Yeah.
They also understood that, there's no single model, way of doing collaborative agriculture. And I think what you said, yours is an example. If you can, as Anton said, highlight that, create a narrative, create a story, and share it with others. I think it will help, other people, sink, for the idea to sink in their minds,
For me, I think the key, because we did a opening day, kind of like, baseball season thing, opening of the garden party. It was on Memorial Day after we planted virtually everything that needs to be out there up to that point. And then we just had a potluck kind of thing, fire pit, and just chatting away. And the subjects were everything, totally non-garden related, really. It was just everybody kind of getting to know one another even more. So I was thinking just challenge other, your own point, hey, join in, get involved.
Do you take pictures?
No,
Could you?
Thought we should.
Because I think if you, so here's my thought. If you can take pictures every 2 weeks or so of the garden, of people, and maybe 1 or 2 of the entire group, what we do is potentially, as part of the survey, say if you haven't thought about collaborative food production, food growing.
Food growing.
God, I hate that.
We'll wordsmith it. We'll workshop it. But we right now with the tools, like you stick it into AI, you say create a 30-second little video, and it can have pictures.
Do you know how many
of that.
people you're putting out of work with that AI crap? I know. And how many less people will be trafficked in the film industry? Because all these people, you'll get a DVD out of it.
All right, we'll keep working.
Anyway, I think there's a lot that could. I agree. It's interesting.
Dave,
And how long this lasts, I have no idea.
Kids?
What's that?
How many young kids in your area?
There's just 2 young kids in the neighborhood.
Were they interested
10
in it,
and
or
8.
were they? Just
Well,
curious.
they're 10
No,
and 8.
Dave was forcing them. He was forcing them to work.
Well,
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a good question. I mean, I got 100 people, over 100 people on an email list who do this work with me. And it's all ages. I have kids, I have adults, I have
Yeah,
kids. And I got Dick Godschneider down the road after my butt, crazy. He wants a business model because he says, if I'm gone, it's done. And I agree with him.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that is yet. But with this
Yeah.
community garden, it's, what is the system
Right.
to make it perpetuate for a
Because
long
Yeah.
if you don't have the leadership,
Right.
you don't have the.
But I think that's
You
the
don't have
dangerous
the-
task, is that it's not gonna work with leadership.
But it-
of
well,
one
I mean-
of one person.
That's what I'm saying.
So I agree
What
with
I'm
you.
getting at, have someone, let's call it coordinator.
now we need it.
Coordinator.
Right.
I don't know, what do you want? I
Yeah.
call it leadership because I came out of the military and that's where I come from. So
Agreed.
use
yeah.
whatever word you want. But if you don't have someone guiding it and sort of making it happen, so yeah, what happens when that person isn't around or can't be around? And to bring back the military, we had what was called a turnover jacket, fancy military term for a folder that told you what everybody needs to do in the event that no one is alive to do it. Kind of important in the military,
Yeah,
right?
no one's
So
alive.
it's this, is that we should be developing, for lack of a better term, turnover jackets of how this evolved. So that people could pick that ball up and run with it. Right?
Now,
Does that
Dave,
make sense?
You're growing vegetables. Now, with this group, have you talked about them possibly raising a pig and other things? And
We haven't gotten to that point yet. But I'm,
curious if it would ever get into a discussion and where they would go with that.
Oh, we could talk about that at our next little garden party. And that's the thing that we kicked around, the idea of, hey, we ought to be doing this about a couple of times a month, where we have like our little garden party, and then challenge the members. I hate to use that term, but challenge folks to like take the stuff that we're growing and create a dish, and then to the thing, with and maybe have like recognition for the least external items added in that we couldn't grow here or something, and that kind of thing, or how you might find a way to substitute something that we are growing for something that you can't get a hold of. So there's a ton of like little ideas starting to percolate out of this little project.
I would like to put in a plug for the Church of St. Thomas More Pantry. If you have excess production, you can donate it to the food pantry.
Yeah, because people are getting tired of eating lettuce. Never thought that would be possible. But need to have as part of these ideas is that, because there will be surplus production, and there should be, because you've got other critters that are going to come in and try to have their own amount of your surplus production. We now have our own bunny rabbit that moved in this year.
Well-
Probably heard about the thing and wanted to join.
Yeah, absolutely. Not into animal production though, the bunny rabbit.
No,
No,
No.
absolutely.
no, he's it's the wild eastern cottontail that has taken over the woodchuck's den, I guess. Because he's like right at the end of the driveway, 6 o'clock every night. This morning, he was there at 6 o'clock in the morning, near the greenhouse. I'm thinking,
A survey and pass it by Alberto, and it never happened. So it's on my to-do list for
Still a work in progress.
it's work in progress.
yeah.
But overall, really good. I think lots of really good insights. And now the challenge is how to put together a short survey that people will be willing to complete.
That is a challenge. That's why I said I'm decades ahead.
Okay, I'm done right.
Okay, anyone-
Well, we're just sitting on it. Apparently now it's just going to be sitting there until interest in town, and how we do it. Obviously, we'll have to see what that means, because it doesn't sound like, I think there's a line that people aren't ready to cross, That doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared to provide for it, because I think there will come a time in the future where it's going to become more important, waited until the demand is there.
I think the key with the continued conversations, Dave, that you're having with folks who have the capacity to change policy, right? Because that is a key component that takes way longer than anyone ever expects. And if that component can be ready to go when that
Right.
needs to happen, then I think that would
Yeah.
be
Exactly.
huge.
Yeah.
Okay, be friendly. Lee's not being here. Holly,
Lee's not
what is
here.
Lee doing over there?
Good question. The bees are going, the hives are thriving. Brian was there.
You got honey
We have,
frames full
right,
everywhere.
right. So
Wow.
He's
we're
backed up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I helped him the other day, and everything's full.
So,
Right.
will we extract any? No?
Yep.
He
Oh,
did,
yeah.
and then
Yes,
I extracted 10
extracted.
frames with him the other day,
Yeah.
yesterday.
He
And
said
then
we're
we moved two hives
two
at
to 3
Woodman.
weeks earlier
Yeah.
than last year.
I've got 2 boxes ready to take
Yeah,
out, probably
I
6
got a
gallons.
thinker back.
I'm not
Oh,
gonna
that's
eat 6
great.
gallons of honey, so if you're still looking for honey.
We can't sell, and we can't have enough of it.
Okay,
We just
so-
go through all of it.
'Cause I still have-
Everything we harvest, we sell.
3/4 of a gallon of last fall's stuff. And I'm making mead, I'm actually turning some mead in her, which will be interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Honey vinegar? How would, no, that doesn't sound right. Mead vinegar. I don't know. How that turns out, what it's like.
Yeah, yeah, let us know. Get in touch with Lee, he's coordinating all of that.
2 hives, they're doing great.
Nice.
No, but he was gonna get together with one of the instructors.
There's the faculty, they have a project going through the Ag Experiment Station, and they've got 2
Excellent.
hives. I was just there last weekend, and
Nice.
they're working, and I think they moved them.
Lee and I moved him.
You moved them?
At 8
Okay.
o'clock last night
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
to a senator's. We'll pass.
I'm gonna pass, okay?
It's all good.
Okay, we need to talk today, August 17th. Do we wanna do anything this year, or?
I visited Teresa recently, and there was a thought of I could bring wool, and we could have a skirting table out and go through wool as a new form of a demonstration.
Yep.
Something to do with people,
Yeah.
a hands-on experience
Mhm.
with an idea.
I mean, Teresa's just gonna have sheep there, she's not gonna do any shearing or anything, so.
Yeah, so we thought of I have wool.
I picked up 3 Austrian style size so that we could maybe give people a chance to do some scything as.
I think we need to make something that highlights what you're doing,
Mhm.
like a box with a few pictures or something on it, sign or something with your name or a title, what you're
Yeah.
there for or something, just so it's an attention getter for people that come in and they have a place to go to if they're interested in it.
Yeah, and then a mowing demonstration, and then give people a chance to learn.
Should probably
I
get an
think.
announcement in
But we
Friday
can-
updates,
Yeah,
so people can get it on their calendars.
And we can do that at any time now, because I'm mowing and I'll scythe it down. It's great, 9-foot swaths. That would take 3 passes of my ride-around lawnmower just to do one of those. Of course, it'd be done in a minute, but, you know.
I got 15 acres down, it would take you more than a minute.
Oh, yeah. But it's fun, it's relaxing, it's almost meditative, plus you can hear. You don't have to wear hearing protection. It's really, I think once people start doing it, I don't know, I kind of feel
Well,
a
people
little
have to-
addicted to scything.
We'll have to
I-
have a reason. I mean, they don't, most people are not gonna say, hey, I'm gonna go out and scythe my lawn. I mean,
Yeah, but they,
you-
there you go.
I could go and scythe along Madbury Road where I use my weed whacker instead of.
Well, that's the thing. Whacker, it's the best weed whacker. It's better than a weed whacker.
I just don't know how many people really even know what it is. Like
They,
if
they
you-
don't.
Correct.
you
That's
know,
that's the
think
thing.
you
They
have
don't.
to,
Right.
yeah. So you have to sort of, we're gonna have, I think we should put some little blurbs in Friday updates that highlight certain things that we're doing so that people know what they are. 'Cause
And
I
when
don't
we
think
do our
people-
demos, I think if we can add the essential sort of like the features, because I think people, if they know what a scythe is, they might think hay fields.
Right,
But
exactly.
if we have a
Instead of
place
going
that we
through the
can
morning
mow
workout,
that's tall grass,
where you wanna go.
and if we have just an area you want cut like a lawn, that's another thing. And then also some place where you want to get thing where we clean up an edge where you've got weeds and shit
I
growing.
can leave you.
Yeah, there I did it.
Maybe,
again.
maybe it is worth doing like an informational, because it's like,
Yeah,
I haven't,
yeah.
I mean, I've scythed every morning for the last 4 weeks for at least an hour,
Yeah.
every morning, so I make my or mulch hay, I make my sheep hay, and I make windrow gardens. My
Yeah.
gardens are from scything.
Green matter to my compost heap in the last 2 weeks. Just by cutting it myself,
It's a limited
breaking it up.
application
I
for
can just
most
see
people.
the slogan, scything, it's not just for death anymore.
Right, right.
Cancel your gym membership. It's great exercise. I mean, not only do you get to mow your lawn and go to the gym at the same time. Saves you money, saves you time, sort of.
UNH still gonna.
Yeah, we're gonna do such a tractor. Again, we're gonna get all of our loggers and tractors, and we're probably gonna do some demos of maybe a little plot combine going around, and so we'll do that at Kingman, and still deciding on a second thing. We haven't done Fairchild in a while. We might do that.
Now, earlier you talked about the greenhouses at Fairchild. You were gonna look into.
Oh, do the. Yeah, so maybe we do Fairchild because they have the plots over there,
Yeah.
and that would be good. Yeah, so let's just plan on Fairchild and Kingman then.
We
You're gonna
will
run?
do touch a tractor as well. It's a big hit, believe it or
Yes.
not. As well as I'm assuming Lee will be up for honey tasting again. Saturdays typically Laura Fox Point Oysters is there, so she and be selling oysters, as well as what was I just thinking of? James on a regular basis, so I'm hoping as part of Farm Day he can put some special ones together, which I think would be great.
Sounds good.
But we'll have a better description of that as we get closer to printing something.
We sent notices around to Lee and Madbury too. People.
There's
there.
nobody in Madbury,
No.
but there's
Copple House and Lee, I think she
4
listed.
people in Lee.
Does Seacoast eat local? I'll find out about whether it's Seacoast eat local because their headquarters is at Tuckaway, right?
Right.
So maybe they want to do something. I'll check in with Sean.
Okay. Land stewardship?
Meeting about a month ago, nothing on the agenda related to our work is in 2 days on Wednesday. And as far as I can tell, nothing planned that would be of direct interest to the AgCom.
Okay, community garden?
I did talk to Community Garden, and she said that they are struggling because they have plots that aren't being used, and they've had some difficulty finding, like, getting that person to manage it. The people that had done it in the past when Colin Ware moved away, and so she was feeling a little discouraged about it, and I don't know, I think that there needs to be more. I don't think many people know about it to begin with.
That's right.
I had talked to Teresa about that. Did they ever think about putting like a sandwich board right on the side of 108, letting people
Well,
know about a community?
They're being a little bit careful because I guess the neighbor that was having some issues with them using the driveway and driving in, has become a little bit more friendly to the idea, but they really don't have. The idea was that it was going to be sort of a walk-in place, but that really doesn't work. And then they don't have. I actually haven't been over there, so I've got to go over and check it out. But they don't have a good. They can't accommodate a lot of vehicles there, so they've been reluctant to advertise a lot because they don't quite know how to manage that situation. So it's a shame if you know they've got a solar array, they've got a pump, they put some energy into making that site. So it would be, but yeah, there's some issues that have to be addressed with how to get more, I guess. And
Or maybe the participation should be for the faculty area.
there hasn't been.
There's no one going out and talking to people door to door.
That's what I was talking to her about, was, well,
Yeah.
how can we get, where would be a good place, like, so we were talking about if you put something up at the community church, maybe, but I think she's been reluctant to actually make a big deal and put it in Friday updates, because she doesn't know quite how she would accommodate.
Well, how many beds are there? They're what, 16 foot by 4 foot? And
I don't even know.
there aren't that many.
No, there aren't.
There's-
No.
I expanded mine. I've got 3,000 square feet going. And so it's hard for like somebody to come in and just work a small bed. They're not going to get enough food out of it. This is your bed. This is this other person's bed. This is it's not providing an opportunity for people to work together and create that sense of
Well, I mean,
community.
the community garden at Wagon Hill is set up that way too, and I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of collaboration there. It's just,
Well, I think once you get it going,
Right.
there is, once people get to
Right.
know one another.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I also think, I know this was true at Wagon Hill, there has to be sort of a critical, to build up enough energy. And, I mean, because for a number of years, when it came to the work day, who came were the people who were on the board, who are basically the people who had the but we also have 160 beds,
Right, yeah.
So,
Yeah, you had to reach that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so to keep the momentum going, it's hard when you have just a small number of beds.
Well, they don't advertise it. It's the
Well,
worst
that's the-
problem, and nobody sees it.
Well, that's the thing.
That's
People drive by
another
it every day,
That's
and
true.
nobody
Yeah.
sees it. They'd have been better off put it on this
Yeah.
side of the
That-
hill to
An
start.
article in Friday updates would be good.
But as I'm saying, she's worried, doesn't want to aggravate the neighbor that was upset about the traffic going through. So there's some
Yeah.
issues that have to be dealt with there.
Ellen, is there a waiting list for Wagon Hill? Or there?
Yeah, the overflow from Wagon Hill.
And
Right.
if
We
you get a
actually,
waiting list on Longmont.
I don't
send it.
think that we have a waiting list now,
We don't
because I
have that
think we
many
have a
people.
couple extra beds at Wagon Hill too.
I was thinking of the Meadows property as, again, without knowing the details of the area, as a possible site for demonstrating collaborative food production, actually.
Yeah.
Good idea.
But you
So,
got 10,000 cars drive by that every day. If they would just put a simple sign by the road, just to highlight it, saying, hey, there's a garden back here.
But
community
I don't
garden.
think they're looking for the
There's
garden.
people that come out of Durham Point that are all over that area that drive by that every day.
But I
True,
like,
but-
I like Alberto's point. You need a place that
Need a
just
demo.
focuses
Right.
the actual collaborative work,
Yeah.
the hands-on, like, if we just establish 4 workshops a year, just to start this year, it's like,
More than
What?
yeah, but that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
that's all you need, you
Yeah.
just have to say
Yeah.
yes,
Absolutely.
and you'll
Yeah.
get one.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
better than 0.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So, I would push that, so what could connect to the survey. In some point of just saying, here's, how do you lead someone after a survey? How do you lead someone to actually practically do it? And then here's a site where we're gonna practice it, we're gonna teach it, we're gonna mentor it.
Right.
And then you can then garden.
Then you need, the other elements that you want to pull into this over time somehow is
hoop house.
start seedlings, provide seedlings, have people come in and that's what we did this spring. We had to plant, start stuff in February, March, and then get it into the garden. By the time it was ready, everybody coming down to put stuff in. And then as we evolve, we have it set up. I did a big bunch of sown when every 10 days, so based on like let's say early June, mid-June. Anybody that's in the group could come in and go, oh, what do we need to do today? This is what we need to sow today. This is what we're transplanting out into the garden. And on the other side is the cropping, what we might be able to harvest, what we should be looking at. And then there's a map of the garden and what's where, generally speaking. So so we started back, I think, late February we started seedlings. And we were putting stuff in undercover by, mid-March. So certain things that can withstand the cold. Because there's plenty of light, there's just no warmth. So if you provide, row covers over brassicas, they'll fell until the heat comes. And so that's worked out really well. Except I was kind of lazy about putting the covers
Right.
on.
One
Right.
step.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, we can't have these bigger ideas because once we have these
Yeah.
big ideas, we have these big dreams, then we lose energy
Yeah.
because
We don't-
it doesn't.
right.
And then
Right.
you're done.
Yeah.
It's like tomorrow, it's gonna, next
Right.
month, she just has to show up.
Yeah,
If someone
I'm
can
sure
put
I'm sure
energy
she'd be
to have her
I'm sure
show
she'd
up.
be willing
And
to come.
then
And then-
we can get some traction maybe
Right.
going.
Yeah.
Build from there.
So maybe we should put her on.
Yes, first.
If she's on the agenda, she's coming.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. If she doesn't show up, we'll go out and get her.
Well, she lives right over here, so.
See? Easy peasy.
She lives across the street from the garden.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
So the workshop can park at her house.
Yeah, right, no. No,
Okay, the other
that's,
business. Everybody's talked out. Okay, need a motion to adjourn?
aye.
Hi.
So when you look at the hiring, what did you see?
They're good.
They're good? Good for another, okay.
More honey capped, more brood,
Or there more larvae
more larvae.